The House of Representatives actually succeeded in passing Trumpcare 3.0 yesterday. Of course, the first iteration of the bill failed. The second one, I don't even think came up for a vote. Looked like it was totally dead in the water, but now we have the 3.0 version, and it passed the House. Now, I'm going to tell you what's in the bill, and buckle up because it's not pretty. So about 90% of this bill is the same as the original proposal, and I'm going to remind you what those provisions are, as well as give you the new ones. So we have reporter Laurel Raymond here, gives us the details. She says the CBO estimation of the first iteration of the bill projected that it would cause 24 million people to lose their health insurance in the next 10 years. The White House's own projection was even harsher, estimating a drop in overall coverage to the tune of 26 million. All right, so let me just pause and explain that a little bit. When we talk about the CBO, it's nonpartisan. So, this is the CBO, it's a group that, or an agency that has been cited by Republicans whenever they have something to say that might be, might portray a Democratic piece of legislation in a negative light. So it's a nonpartisan group. They say, hey, 24 million people are going to lose their health insurance under the first version of the bill. The White House's own estimates were, no, actually it's going to be 26 million. So the White House's was worse. And then get this. This was the first version of the bill. Under the version of the bill that actually passed, they made it more right-wing and more draconian to appease the so-called Freedom Caucus, which is the Tea Partiers. And they didn't even allow the CBO to do a full breakdown of the new bill before they passed it. And that was on purpose, because they knew, if the CBO gets their hands on this and they give us the facts on it, it's going to be ugly. So let's hurry up and pass it before we have facts on it, because if we have the facts on it, it'll just get hammered in the media, and it'll be hammered by the opposition party, and it'll be basically untenable, and you can't vote for it lest you be an idiot who, wants your constituents to feel the pain. So just let's not even have a CBO estimate. Let's not get final numbers. Let's just vote on it right now. And again, the newer version of the bill is going to have even more people uninsured than the first version of the bill. Absolutely incredible. All right, let's continue. Since then, the legislation has been tweaked to allow states to opt out of Obamacare's essential health benefits mandate, which requires health plans to cover some pretty basic services, things like hospitalizations, emergency room visits, prescriptions, and maternity care. The revised bill also allows states to opt out of protections for people with pre-existing conditions. About half of Americans could thereby be excluded from those protections. The definition of pre-existing conditions includes gender-based factors such as postpartum depression and even being a survivor of rape or domestic abuse, or domestic violence, they say. So now they could opt out of protections for pre-existing conditions. By the way, nice compromise, guys, because the so-called moderate Republicans, which basically just means Republicans who are elected in otherwise blue states and sometimes blue districts, they know, okay, I can't vote for this Obamacare repeal because then people in my district are going to lose their health care and I'm going to be voted out instantly. So at the very least, they would argue, well, okay, look, we're with you on a lot of the draconian shit, but don't get rid of the protections for pre-existing conditions. There's no way I could spin that to my constituents to get reelected. And the Tea Partiers said, no, we're going to get rid of every word of Obamacare, including the protections for pre-existing conditions. So they came up with a compromise. Allow states to opt out of protections for people with pre-existing conditions. So in other words, what will happen is every red state in the country will say, yeah, we don't have protections for people with pre-existing conditions. Some blue states will probably say that as well. And you'll only have the bluest states that say, yeah, no, we still have the protection for people with pre-existing conditions. But look at what's defined as a pre-existing condition. They say if you've been raped, yeah, if an insurance company can reject you because of pre-existing conditions. And by the way, even if they didn't go in this direction, if they still had the protections for people with pre-existing conditions, under the Republican bill, it wasn't even really protections because they would allow the health insurance companies to jack up your prices, your premiums, massively, so that it would basically make it unaffordable. So it's, in effect, having a ban on protections for people with pre-existing conditions without even having it. Well, now they went as far as to say, yeah, no, you can opt out of that. Think about how disconnected this is from what the American people want. Because guess what? Yes, when you poll people about Obamacare, it's about 50% support. Which, okay, you could argue, come on, it's got to be higher. I hear you. But when you go provision by provision in Obamacare, the only one people don't like is the individual mandate. Every other one is massively popular. Close the Medicare donut hole, super popular. Allow kids to stay on their parents' health insurance until they're 26 years old, super popular. It used to be lower than that. Protection for pre-existing conditions, super popular. Expansion of Medicaid, super popular. So they're just taking a fucking sledgehammer to it, and the American people don't support any of these provisions when you get into the details. Okay, more. Under Trumpcare, states could opt out of Obamacare's current provisions and get a waiver instead. In that case, people with pre-existing conditions, whoever had a gap in their health insurance coverage, could then be charged exorbitant rates by insurers or kicked into high-risk pools. All right, now let me give you info on the high-risk pools. Republicans have touted such high-risk pools as protection for people with pre-existing conditions, but in the past, such pools often offered long waiting lists for coverage, skimpy plans, and sky-high costs. To pass Trumpcare, Republicans claimed that an extra $8 billion they added to cover high-risk pools would prevent this from being the case. However, that number falls far short of the $200 billion a Center for American Progress analysis estimated would be required. So what that means is, if you want to expand the high-risk pools to protect people with those pre-existing conditions who basically won't get covered, you need about $200 billion to get that done. And they're like, nah, we'll give you $8 billion. What? All right, they say, according to Kaiser Family Foundation Senior Vice President Larry Levitt, the $8 billion might cover a few 100,000 high-risk enrollees out of millions who might need it. That's incredible. Now, I get it. Center for American Progress is, left-leaning for sure. So you could say, I don't believe that number. I don't believe that the high-risk pools need $200 billion. But even if you cut that in half and say they need $100 billion, they're only giving $8 billion. This is out of this world irresponsible and immoral and unethical and flat out stupid, this plan. All right, so now let's sum it up. What does all of this mean? Well, under Trumpcare 3.0, the uninsured rate is going to go from 10%, which is what it would be under Obamacare, to about 19%. So it nearly doubles the uninsured rate. We're also going to have, to give you the raw number here, it would be about 53 million people uninsured. There's going to be an $880 billion cut to Medicaid over the next decade. And this is when, remember, Trump promised repeatedly on the campaign trail he wasn't going to cut it. He's cutting it to the tune of $880 billion over a decade. And also, here's probably the most important part, $594 billion in tax cuts for the rich. In fact, everybody in the top 0.1% is going to get $200,000 more in their bank account each year. So this is class warfare, and it's a massive redistribution of wealth from the middle class and the poor to the top 1%, and specifically top 0.1%. That's what this bill is. I'm not sure I've ever seen a piece of legislation worse than this. And you know who agrees with me? The American people. You know what this, the first version of Trumpcare was polling at? 17%. And remember, this new version, about 90% the same, identical. And the only thing they changed were things that made it worse. So they changed stuff specifically when it comes to pre-existing conditions and gave people less protection. And oh yeah, by the way, as part of this bill, Planned Parenthood is also defunded. The Democrats were, when this passed, and it passed razor-thin margin, passed with 217 votes, the Democrats were singing, na, 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 hey, 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 goodbye. And my first reaction to that was like, come on, you're like trivializing a really horrific moment where millions of people are going to lose their health care. And yes, people will die as a result of this. But then thinking back on it, it's like, yeah, it's a little flippant of the Democrats to say that. But that's totally true. The Republicans who voted for this, forget it. Forget it. They're jokes, man. This whole fucking bill is just crafted as a giant giveaway to the rich, a redistribution to the rich, and, a heist for the health insurance companies. And remember, Obamacare was already a right-wing piece of legislation. Richard Nixon proposed an individual mandate system, which is what Obamacare is. Bob Dole proposed it. Newt Gingrich and Chuck Grassley supported it. Mitt Romney put it into place in Massachusetts when he was governor. So this is a right-wing bill through and through. In fact, the Heritage Foundation wrote policy papers in support of individual mandate systems like Obamacare, and they said at the time, this is our answer to the Democratic proposal, which is single-payer, Medicare for all. So we already did a right-wing, watered-down reform that keeps the health insurance companies in control, the private for-profit health insurance companies. And the Republicans have gotten so extreme that out of spite, because Obama, a Democrat, passed their bill, they go, we hate it now, we're going to get rid of our own bill, and put in its place a ragtag bill that's slapped together at the last minute. That, guys, they don't even care about the outcomes. That's the point. Like, they're doing this reform to the healthcare system, but everything that would be a measure of the healthcare system and how good it is objectively worse. You have more people, you have fewer people, I should say, with insurance, so more people who aren't covered. You have prices that are going to go up. That's another aspect of this. The people who need care the most and who struggle the most to afford it, their prices shoot up under this. So it's basically like a reverse reform. It's going in the wrong direction. Paul Ryan, remember when he gave the speech, in front of a bunch of reporters, and he's showing all these graphs because he's viewed as an intellectual, the biggest faux intellectual on the planet. He read a few Ayn Rand books and thinks he's a genius. And he's talking about how, under Obamacare, you have these young, healthy people paying in, and they're paying for the older, sick people. It's crazy. That's insurance, you idiot. What the fuck do you expect to happen? Yes, that's the whole point of insurance. Doesn't get it, doesn't care. This is a worst-case scenario bill. Now, here's the good news. The good news is it appears to be dead on arrival in the House. They're going to need 60 votes to pass it. Now, when I tweeted that yesterday, that, filibuster the shit out of this bill, a lot of people responded to me and were like, but the filibuster is dead. That's not true. The filibuster is only dead at the moment for cabinet appointments, so they just need a simple majority for cabinet appointments. And Supreme Court picks. They recently nuked the 60-vote threshold for picks for the Supreme Court. For this, you can still do a filibuster. Now, is there a chance they go nuclear again? Yes. If they do that, I mean, it is such an unmitigated disaster for the country that I honestly wouldn't even know how to put it into words, wouldn't even know how to begin to break it down. It's amazing to me that it appears like one of the two major political parties doesn't even really pretend to care about having positive outcomes with their legislation. That's the only thing I could take away from this. That's it. There's no other, if anybody who knows the details of this, the only thing you can take away from it is, that wasn't even a consideration. Like, how will this affect people? Now, the Democrats are horrible, and they're sellouts as well, but it's just to a lesser degree, and there's at least fucking provisions sprinkled in, even under shitty healthcare the Democrats propose, like Obamacare, where, okay, yes, those definitely help people. Certain provisions are definitely positive. Others are just a sellout and a giveaway to the health insurance companies, but Obamacare was a step in the right direction. This is the utter destruction of the U.S. healthcare system. So I would fight tooth and nail. I would fight viciously to stop this, and I wouldn't rest until I was positive it is completely and utterly dead, because it's one of the worst pieces of legislation I think I've ever seen.